We're starting a new series, and the aim of the series over the next month and a half is to look at something which we call our mission blocks. If you go to our website, you will see our vision statement. And along with our vision statement, our vision statement is on earth as it is in heaven. It's not a crazy, wacky vision statement. In fact, there are a number of churches which have a similar vision statement, which is not surprising because it's in the Bible. It's in the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And our vision is that we would see more of the kingdom breaking through into our lives as individuals. More of the kingdom breaking into us as a church community. More of the kingdom breaking through us into the world around us, on earth as it is in heaven. And then what we do is we've got these 4 mission blocks. And these mission blocks are, how have I described it? They are there to show how we as KingsGate Church are responding to this vision statement. What are we as KingsGate Church wanting to do to enable ourselves to walk in step with on earth as it is in heaven? To respond to what Jesus has done for us. Now, the reason we're going through these mission statements and these mission blocks is because we haven't done it for a long, long time, and there are a lot of new people who've joined the church in the last couple of years over COVID, and it gives us an opportunity to describe to you why we do what we do, what are the things that are important to us. So it's a little bit like an extended DNA course, where you get to know a little bit more about us. The other thing is what we're also wanting to try and do in this time is to show how each one of us can get involved in being part of KingsGate and being part of the KingsGate story. So that's why we're doing this. And the first mission block that we have is loving God. And you can see this on our website. I'm going to read it slowly to you so that I'll just read it once. And this is the description that we've got to this first mission block. And remember what these mission blocks are. They are our response to the vision statement. What are we wanting to do in order to walk in step and see more of on earth as it is in heaven? And the first thing is loving God, described as such. We believe that our relationship with God is the cornerstone of our existence as humans. We want to be a people who love God, that's Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, wholeheartedly and sacrificially, living in a vibrant and genuine relationship with Him. That's the first mission block. I just want to go to that first sentence there. It says, our relationship with God is the cornerstone of our existence as humans. There is nothing more precious than our relationship with God. Nothing. A relationship which has been restored through Jesus, who's removed our sin and our shame, which means that you and I can boldly and confidently go into the very presence of God and to call the creator of heaven and earth Abba, Father. There are so many other things that we can think are precious, valid things. We can think even things we pray for. We can think healing, provision, breakthrough in various things in our lives are precious and they're important. Absolutely. But nothing is more important. Nothing is more precious. Nothing is more amazing than our relationship with God. John Piper said, he is quite a well-known theologian and church leader. He says, the Christian faith and salvation is not just about the forgiveness of sins. If it's about the forgiveness of sins is amazing. I mean, I thank God for the forgiveness of sins every day. But it's the salvation enables us to be with Him for eternity. That's the goal, that we are with Him or we're not with Him. And I know that it's easy in the busyness of life and how life drags in on us and waylays us and the distractions that we have. And sometimes just trying to make it through the day, that our relationship with God becomes somehow tainted or lost and dry. And we can't imagine it as beautiful, but it is beautiful. It is more amazing. It is more precious than anything you could ever need or want, more satisfying than anything else that you could imagine. And as we read through the scriptures, we see that it is possible to, in increasing steps, walk in and understand the wonder and the vibrancy and the beauty of this relationship with God. And one day we will see it in its fullness. We will see the full wonder and be overwhelmed and be amazed. And when we are in that space, we will look back at our troubles and the battles and the struggles that we've gone through, and they will be as if nothing compared to the wonder of the glory of what we have with Him. We will be amazed at what we have received. And that's why Paul could say, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. This life, I live for Christ, but I've got so much more to be with Him forever. Imagine the deepest need, your deepest want that is satisfied in Christ. That is how you have been designed. When we lose or forget the wonder of this intimacy and this relationship, we become dry, we become resentful, we become legalistic, we become driven, we become proud, and we become a people of thorns. That's what we become. Some key things I just want to mention here, 3 points. Our love for Him is always a response to His great love for us. In 1 John 4:19, it says, we love God, we love because He first loved us. If I'm honest with you, as I've even been preparing for this time to talk about our vision statement and about our mission blocks, I've felt an element of just caution. Because there's sometimes when you talk about vision statements and what our mission blocks are, it can feel quite corporate. And what you can kind of get in your head is, this is what we're going to do to make it all happen. It's all about what we do and who we are and what programs we're going to do and how we're going to become better Christians and how are we going to become a better church. But actually the priority and the forerunner of this is what God has done for us. It starts with who he is and what He has done and the wonder of it all. When the angels came and declared on that first Christmas day, good news of great joy, it wasn't a program or a new set of rules or a self-help book. It was a declaration of what Christ has done, what He has achieved. It's always got to be about Him first. And we have to be very careful, however we use mission statements and mission blocks, whatever it might be, is that we don't get it into our head that it's actually about suddenly if we just do enough of the right thing, it's all going to work out. It ain't. It all begins and starts with Him. His work and what He has done is the absolute priority. Our prioritizing of our relationship with God is not only a reflection of the fact that it's the most precious thing that we could ever have, but it's also a recognition that we are helpless and can do absolutely nothing apart from Him. Just getting my notes out here again. That we can do absolutely nothing without Him. We will never build anything or do anything of eternal kingdom value without Him. We will never see fruit that will last. I was reading this in John chapter 15. It says, you did not choose me, this is Jesus speaking, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit and fruit that will last. Do you know that God is committed, Jez, to you bearing fruit and fruit that will last? We can sometimes think to ourselves, Taryn, that I want to make my life to be meaningful. I want my life to bear fruit. But you're nothing compared to how much God is committed to see that in your life. In your life, Emma. In your life, Michael. I've appointed you that you will bear fruit, and not just fruit that will look impressive for a moment, but fruit that will last forever, that won't be burnt up, that's built on Jesus Christ and enabled through the Holy Spirit. But the rest of John chapter 15 says this, but as the rest of the chapter says, this can only happen if we abide in Him, if we remain in His love. The only way that we will ever bear fruit as a church, the only way we will ever bear fruit as individual Christians is if we abide in Him. As soon as we step outside of the wonder of this relationship, in awe of his love, and as soon as we step out of the amazement of this, we become, I don't know what we're producing, but it's not eternal fruit. It's not kingdom stuff. The third thing about this is our loving and worshiping of God gives us perspective and consequently courage to carry on, to endure and to persevere. It enables us to see all life in the context of a greater reality, and that is him. I'm reading through the book of Hebrews at the moment. As I'm doing my devotions through Hebrews, I've got to preach through this. It's such a good book. I mean, I have to say that I'm a pastor and it's in the Bible. But why it's such a good book is it's basically written to a whole lot of people who want to give up. They're a second generation church who are actually saying, is this Christian deal any good? Is it making a difference? And it's like the whispers of people I hear all the time who've been in churches for years and, been in Christian families. Does this Christian thing actually work? And the writer of Hebrews speaks into that. And one of the ways he tells us to deal with this is to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. To keep our eyes amazed at what he has done, that we don't forget this great salvation that we have received and we don't drift away. The way we don't drift, the way we stay the course, do you know that endurance and patience and perseverance is huge? Huge in our walk. The only way we do that is through this relationship with him. All the work we do as a church has to be animated by this reality. That we are deeply and indescribably loved by God the Father as an act of 100% pure grace. And we are held securely in his loving arms. Everything we do has got to be animated by this. We could have the most incredible outreach projects. We could be on BBC News talking about the incredible things we're doing. I could be doing podcasts about how to be a successful outreach church. We could be on the cover of books. And we would actually have nothing if we haven't built on this relationship. We could have Graham could be selling my books. I'd have to write one still. But he could be selling my books. We could be live streaming around the world. But if we have not this love, then we have nothing. Alternatively, we could be meeting in my shed, which would not be comfortable. We could be meeting in my shed. Yeah, if it's still standing. But if we are meeting and we are on the foundation of an intimate relationship with God, we've got everything. It's what are we building on? It's the beginning and the end of it all. And there's a lot everywhere in the Bible you can see biblical support for this, but I just want to pick one story. One of the stories is the story of the nation of Israel, or Israelites returning to the promised land after they've been in exile. And it's detailed in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. And they come back to the promised land, and the promised land is not so cool anymore. There's opposition and difficulty, and there's a whole lot of people wanting to really kick the Israelites out. So it's a dangerous place. And what is the thing? The first thing that God says to the Israelites to return, when you come back into the promised land, what I want you to do is to get your act together, build a wall, get an army sorted out, get things organized, do a lot of training so that you can deal with the issues coming. He never says any of that. He says, build an altar. The altar representing worship and intimacy and relationship with him. I want you to build an altar first. Because no walls will protect you if you don't have that worship and that intimacy with me. And no one will attack you. No one will destroy you as long as you have that intimacy with me. What the most important thing for that nation, what the most important thing for the people was the sense of knowing their God. The rightness of that relationship. The intimacy with him. The question I just want to touch on now is, how do we love God? How do we remember what I've said? That it all starts not with our love for him, but it all starts with his love for us. Because he loved us, that we can even only begin to love him. But how do we respond to him? And the words I want to think of when I talk about love, I also want you to think of worship. I want you to think of honor. Honor. How do we honor him? How do we please him? How do we love him? How do we worship him? Now, one of the most demonstrative, high-profile ways that we love God or demonstrate our love for God in a corporate setting, one of the most high-profile ways is the way we do sung worship. And I've actually asked Keath next week if he can speak specifically in this area of loving God through the area of our corporate worship. But I just want to talk a little bit about worship before, in light of this. See, coming out of COVID has been interesting for us, getting back into our Sunday worship meetings and worshiping together. I remember we started off the back of COVID and we all sang with masks on and we sang, we didn't know what we were saying. It was a bit awkward, and it was like, Keath was just keep on going, keep persevere, endurance, patience, just keep going. But I feel we're building into a rhythm, and we're also building into a rhythm of because a number of new people have joined the church, and we're finding what it's like to worship together. And many years ago, many of you will not remember this, but many years ago, we used to have about 40 musicians, numerous bands, and I remember we used to have these worship sessions. I mean, we used to wild worship. At our old venue, we used to do stage diving. Yeah, we stage dived. I used to do like the pastor pogo. I had the one dance step. That's all I could do, and I just went up and down, and my children got embarrassed, but it was enthusiastic. And we used to go worshiping for like an hour and a half. Can't get enough. We like worship 2 hours. We just keep going. It was like, whoa. And so we were doing like vision stuff. And one of the vision things we had, we want to be a people who love and honor God. And we thought, we want to be people who love and honor. Should we do that quite well? We'll tick that off. We'll move to the next one. Why? Because we had these extended times of worship, and we had we felt we worshiped well. We had other things we needed to work on. But we felt we had the honor-loving God on point because of the nature of our worship. And then at that leadership time, Liz Shonrock raised this really awkward point. And she turned around and Liz Shonrock said, I don't think we're good at honoring God and worshiping him. What do you mean? Have you seen our worship? Because most of us can't even be bothered to pitch up on time for a Sunday morning. Ooh, awkward silence. You see, what Liz had put her finger on was that worship is so much more than singing songs. See, worship is an attitude of the heart. It's a posture that seeks to live lives as an act of worship. Before something that we do, it's what we are. Are we worshipers? The Apostle Paul describes this as being a living sacrifice, where everything in our lives becomes an act of worship, where everything in our lives is an act of love. How we parent our children is an act of worship and an act of love. How we do the dishes, I used to be that old school like video. I mean, no one does the dishes anymore, you just put in a dishwasher. But how we do anything in our lives, all of our relationships, what we do with our finances, how we interact in our workspace, everything becomes an act of worship. Everything becomes an act of love because we understand who we are, who we belong to. So there is not just a Sunday morning. It's 24/7. Our lives are worship, and we bring that worship into our times of sung worship. You see, God is not impressed by songs. He's impressed by our hearts. And songs are a vehicle for worshiping hearts to express love. Songs are a vehicle for worshiping hearts to express love. Songs are not a compensation for a heart that is dry and weak and has no affection for God. We can sing the most amazing songs in major seventh chords. I love major seventh or minor seventh chords. We can do all the songs on the right thing and we can move all our emotions, but we've achieved nothing. There was a famous story about Soul Survivor. They were having the most amazing worship. They had Matt Redman. I mean, can you imagine Matt Redman leading the worship? Everything was amazing. And then Mike Pilavachi said, what we're doing is we're actually stopping songs for the next while. So he just everyone arrived because Soul Survival was cool. It was like a hip place. It was nice, and we liked the music, and we knew that little bit when Matt went, and it's moved us a little bit more. And we liked the bridge. And so what he did was he just said, okay, we're stopping this, and we're just all going to come along. And they pushed up to worship, and there was no worship songs, and they just sat there. Well, who else have you got anything to bring to God? Have you got a song to bring to Him? And one of the things that we're saying is actually we've lost the plot here, because what we've become is we've become a place where songs are sung and not where hearts worship. And there's a numerous of places in the Bible where God actually says, and this is the Keath paraphrase, he says, shut up, I hate your songs. He says, shut up, I hate your songs, because you're not worshiping me by loving one another. You're not worshiping me by loving the poor. You're not worshiping me by loving the marginalized and those that everyone else rejects. So you're singing these great songs, but actually the thing which I'm after, your heart's not there. And in 1 John 4:20, the writer says, how can we say in our hearts we love God when we hate our brothers? We cannot say we love God while we've got bitterness. You can't. You can't say, I love God when you're burdened with unforgiveness. You can't say, I love God and I worship Him when you've got hate towards your brothers and your sisters. You see, there's a deeper worship. There's a deeper worship. He goes on, and in various other parts of the Old Testament, we see God says, shut up, I hate your songs, because you're not worshiping and loving me by trusting me. You're trusting idols. You're worshiping other things. And how can you come and worship me and sing to me when actually you're trusting other things? You see, I'm after your heart. He goes on and says, stop the songs. They're like marbles on a chalkboard. It's like, can you just stop your songs? Why? Because there's no justice among you. You don't love justice. You don't care for the orphan and the widow. When you see injustice, you're not moved. You see, I want us to see that actually the work we do to transform our community is an act of worship. The work we do to love people who are in pain and are in need of help is an act of love, an act of worship, as valid and as important as singing any song. It says, other times, you just keep quiet with your songs because you're not worshiping me by faithful endurance. You're not worshiping me by following my ways. In other words, he says, you sing songs, this is from Isaiah, you sing songs, but your hearts are far from me. If we want to be a church which loves God, loving Him is a priority. It's not just about the songs we sing. It's far deeper than that. The hearts we have. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, the prophet Samuel confronts King Saul. And King Saul has made the sacrifice. And it looks, I don't know all the details of what it would have looked like completely, but it would have looked the part. It would have had the right gear, the right smells. I would imagine it would have been an animal being burnt on the altar. But it was wrong. Because it wasn't done with honoring God. It wasn't done with trust. It was done out of fear and insecurity and anxiety. And what does Samuel say to Saul? He says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. And the harsh reality is sometimes it's easier to sing songs than to really love God. It's easier to sing songs than to really worship Him. And that is a challenge for all of us. We want to be a church which is built on loving Him, because we know first and foremost that He has loved us. We want to be individuals, and we want to be a church community that is increasingly amazed by how much we are loved by God. And as a result, we are increasingly transformed into the image of the one who is love. And then that our city, our nation, our work colleagues, the people who walk through the building, the people you play sport with, the other families you know, will sense this difference and say, wow, I mean, Sally's not here, she's left. That testimony she shared this evening was amazing. The way your church has engaged with us has meant that my friends who aren't Christians were keen or happy for my children to come to the church. That people will begin to sense and see and feel and smell Jesus on us. Steve Brown is a theologian and a church leader who I like, and he talks about us smelling like Jesus. That when we walk into the room, people might say, "Jeepers, I know Keith looks a bit strange, and maybe he wears floral shirts sometimes and whatever, but gee, something different, like it smells like Jesus is there." That's the best thing anyone could ever say about me, us. Is there something about KingsGate Church which smells like Jesus? You're just there and it smells like him. That's what my desire is for us.